welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, if there's a bustle in his hedgerow, won't be alarmed now.
Tim Longo. What?
I know, right? I know. So this is a deep cut.
This has got to be, because right. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's from Stairway to Heaven. You've heard this song.
Yeah, okay.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, you don't be alarmed now. Okay, you got that?
Okay.
The next line, you got this?
I don't remember
It's just the spring clean for the May Queen.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and the May Queen, when is the May Queen crowned?
On May 1st?
Exactly.
May Day?
May Day.
Wow, dude, that is unbelievable.
Thank you very much.
Did you just Google search May Day references and songs or something?
I actually looked up May Day, not for references, but just what is May Day?
Yeah, right.
And May Day, it said on Wikipedia, first thing, May Day is Tim Longo's birthday. And then the second thing is it's an ancient rite of some kind. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what they must be talking about in this
in Stairway to Heaven.
Classic Stairway to Heaven Led Zeppelin song. So yeah,
wow.
Come to Dev Game Club for the video games, stay for the classic rock references.
Oh, jeez. That's amazing.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, in the first couple minutes. Good work.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw it in there.
Yeah, that's good. People love it.
Sometimes.
Let's get right back into Planescape Torment. We're on the third. We're on the third.
This is the third.
Oh my God! And I barely scratched the surface, which we'll get to.
I almost said it again.
This game is gigantic.
I can't have too many in a row though, so I gotta catch myself.
Store them up. Yeah. So last time we were talking a little bit about how when you have a mature engine, you shove a lot of stuff into a game. And I was a little bit worried. You'll remember because you can, right? Because it's easy to do. And I was a little bit worried about just how overwhelming things were, in particular in the Hive. But also a little bit as you started to kind of make your way to Rag Picker Square and all that stuff. We had an email from a gentleman named Nameless. Normally we read these towards the end, but I thought it was worth discussion because now I have a different theory. And he says, from Nameless, he says, in your recent episode about Planescape Torment, you were discussing how PST might have had this much content because it's so much easier to just churn out content as soon as the engine stands and all that. And while that may be the case oftentimes, I don't think this applies to PST at all. PST was only the second Infinity Engine game to be released. The first one was obviously Baldur's Gate in 1998, and PST came out in 1999. In comparison, Icewind Dale 2 came out in 2002. So development of PST was well underway before Baldur's Gate came out. Also, Baldur's Gate was of course developed by BioWare, while PST was made by Black Isle, so they had their own learning process as far as the engine is concerned. I also think the content is so deep because PST didn't have the budget to do things like multiplayer, which Baldur's Gate had. And honestly, Tim, this is an aside, I don't remember at all.
That's the only way I played them.
You played them co-op.
Every Infinity Engine game except for this one, I played co-op.
Wow.
All the way through.
That's a totally separate conversation.
With Reed. Yeah,
I'm gonna totally just mark that down as a thing that we need to talk about at some point.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, he says, so they just fully embrace single player. In recent interviews with Planescape Torment, Chris Avallone even hints himself, he gave a couple links, that BioWare gave them the Infinity Engine before it was done, which is the reason why PST's IE is a little bit more of a distant cousin than a direct sibling of the version seen in Baldur's Gate. The differences don't just show in the user interface, but also in options. While Baldur's Gate already had tab highlighting in 1998, PST never had it until the recent release of the Enhanced Edition, etc. So, the differences in the two editions are also among the reasons why Beamdog did Enhanced Editions of 4 games first and waited so long to do Planescape Torment. Anyway, so he closed with some other stuff, and Nebulous, I'm sorry I didn't read everything in its entirety, and kind of coalesce some stuff. So yeah, so my theory is kind of out the window to a certain degree. And
but you have a new theory.
I do have a new theory.
Which I think I know where you're going.
I was going to say, do you have a theory?
I do. Well, but I don't want to spoil your theory.
Go ahead. It's fine.
Well,
We're friends here.
All right. Well, my prediction. Well, I'll couch it this way. My prediction about what your theory is going to be is that when you don't know an engine well, and you do figure out enough about it to create some sort of content, then you will double down in those places that you can make effective progress. And one thing that is to be said for sure about Planescape is that there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of dialogue, little on the combat and the other systems that you'd find, I would say, more prominently in the Baldur's Gate games. It's not as prevalent, but if words are what you can do and dialogue trees are what you can do, then you're going to do a lot of that stuff. And it feels like almost overwhelming in this game. Very easy to miss stuff. So maybe they leaned into that and focused primarily on that, and thus the game became what it is. Is that where you're headed?
Yeah. Thanks for stealing my thunder.
Was it really?
Yeah, pretty much.
Did I catch it? Nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, my other thought was, of course, that, in your introductory area, naturally that's going to be the first thing that you show people and things like that. Like you're trying to sell this thing to management or whatever. At this time, if Interplay was first getting it, in the form of Black Isle, they still had basically to, convince a producer or whoever, a money person somewhere, and basically they had this one probably starting place for their game, and it might not have just been the sort of engine capabilities that weren't there. They may also have not known where the story was going, because this is such a crazy kind of story. So there's a lot of reasons why you might just shove a ton of content into your introductory areas. It's okay. We know you're going to start off here's our story hook. You're dead, and you wake up. Which Avalon and other people who have worked with them have used again at Obsidian. As Fallout New Vegas, right? It's you wake up and somebody put you in a grave. They're burying you. So it's
there's an Avalon trope there that
exactly. Yeah. So I feel like it's well, we know that much. We don't know a lot else yet.
Yeah.
And let's just start building out that. And also maybe try to set up a bar for the series of the game, right? Of this is the level,
vertical slice kind of stuff.
Exactly. This is the level of this is the how specific we want everything to be or whatever. I mean, this is often the case, right? I mean, and you can talk to your own experience, but at Bethesda, for Skyrim, that first section from right after the intro, after character creation, and you've encountered the dragon, you come out of the sort of initial dungeon tutorial thing. From that down through Riverwood and into this Baron, Bleak Falls Baron, and out was the thing that we played every day for years. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that got just tons of focus of what, how do you figure out how to do things in the game you're making in that initial section, and what's polish going to feel like, I can certainly think of shared experiences that we have, but do you have any other experiences that are kind of along those lines?
Yeah, for sure. I think the trick, this is actually an interesting kind of game dev topic, I'd say, for people who don't go through this. You're basically talking about what is that vertical slice or that slice
the proving ground.
The proving ground of a chunk of the game that you're using for multiple proving Sometimes it's for executive approval. Sometimes it's for team identity, right? So the team understands what you're making. Sometimes it's for proving out systems or what have you. And definitely had that on Tomb Raider for the genesis of things. And oftentimes that also becomes a thing that proves out what you shouldn't do, because not all vertical slices make it through, or definitely don't make it through into the game as they were conceived. They kind of get major retrofitting. And I think to your point about your example about at Bethesda, I think that's actually a really good example of an effective way to use it, because it's going to stay in, and you just refine it over and over and over and over again, right? And it's hard on certain timelines for teams to do that sometimes, and so in our realm, when you're making a more linear shooter or something like that, you sometimes you pick the first level, but oftentimes you pick a level that may be somewhere in the middle of the game or at another spot because it's going to achieve the goals of the vertical slice, i.e. you need a vehicle level and you need a level with these sorts of AI and this sorts of game, this sort of gameplay. So the first level often doesn't achieve that goal of vertical slice, but you do spend a lot of time on it and you iterate on it and you throw stuff out and then you do it again and you throw stuff out and you do it again while you're trying to find that identity. So I think conveniently it would be nice if it were always the first level in my past, but it wasn't always the first level.
And maybe the second level. I mean, because the first level, you often want to do the first level last, or the first thing last, because you're going to tutorialize a lot of stuff. We had Republic Mando, Troy Mashburn went and did all that tutorialization that happens in that first area where they explain, like, how all the buttons work and... whatever. And you build the squad up as you do that as well, and so you kind of have all that stuff. But, I was also thinking of Starfighter, where we, for each milestone would pick levels that were going to be kind of vanguards of development. And that we're going to push forward some aspect of development we hadn't figured out yet. So at Alpha, we took one level to alpha before we took other levels to alpha. I can't remember which one it was, but it's the one where you fly out of a cave and into a kind of a little lake, and you're following this river downstream. I don't know.
Man.
Right. And there's all these turrets and things like that, and I don't remember the specifics. Right. There's a waterfall that you fly through, and and we had to figure out, like, how are we going to do not only an intro cutscene, but like what we called a mid-tro, which was like a middle of the mission's cutscene, and then at the end to do an outro, and it was like fully like end to end,
stitching it together. And
exactly everything we're going to do in this mission is possible with the tech we have and all the tools we have, and etc. And it's going to work, and this is what the player will actually experience. And there are bugs, sure, but we're going to figure them out. And those tend to be the levels that get a lot of focus because that level designer for us, I want to say that it was Harley Baldwin.
It might have been.
I think it was. We'll get all the, and she's not Harley Baldwin, she's Harley White Widow, but get all the support, like anything you need for us to make this milestone, we'll give to you, and then it'll trickle down.
Yeah.
One of the rare cases where trickle-down economics actually works.
Well, yeah. Then all your other levels are falling behind, and then you're like, "Are we?"
But I mean, it was the intention
I agree. I agree. I'm just giving you crap. But yeah. I just recalled too, in the Tomb Raider example, the very beginning of the game was very much like you said, just slaving over that thing for a long time. And I don't think the team would call that their vertical slice per se, but that opening section, because it was so linear and there was an initial puzzle in there that we were trying to prove out, physics puzzles and stuff. And then
probably the fire stuff, and then the swinging
buoyancy and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I can remember it very well.
Yeah, but as far as like finally crafting every moment of that, right? The team went through really heavily, but that ended up kind of being more of a showpiece demo. The real vertical slice was proving out more of like the bigger open hub areas, which Tomb Raider hadn't done before, and nobody knew what the heck they were going to be. So that was more of the camp area, in the kind of big hub area. The first one you get to. So yeah, but you're proving out different things because you're trying to Brett's point, you're trying to prove to yourselves and others who you're the money that you are spending, own the money that you're spending, that you can do it, and especially if you're doing something new. In Starfighter's case, we hadn't made that kind of game before as a team.
Or in-house.
Yeah. So, you had your Factor 5s and your Totally Games making games, and so it was sort of like, why is this team going to make a flight action game when we have these two other external teams making flight action games? So, it's a fascinating. Yeah, back to Torment, I think the Hive definitely smacks of let's make a town, right? Let's make a a town that has zones and has quests that you're going to send you from place to place, and there's inaccessible areas, and there's locks and keys, and then there's an underground area, and
there's factions.
Factions,
You're talking about like the Dustmen and the different gangs and
party members you can pick up,
and party members, and taverns, which are totally D&D thing, which is like places you're probably going to come back to again and again. So there's a lot of tone setting, but there's also a lot of like narrative guts.
Yeah, setting
narrative engine, as we might talk about.
Yeah, right.
If you were making a TV show or something like that.
Yeah, and there's just the what's the foundation of the world, right? There's a lot of, especially in this game, there's a lot of rule setting and kind of like exposition that is. We talked about it, I think, in the first couple episodes. Just this concept that it is so strange, and you need to set up the identity for the player, especially if the player had played a D&D game before, to kind of show you that this isn't what you are used to. It's like the rules are different. And, as a quick aside to that, like just as I'm getting deeper and deeper and remembering all the stuff that's happening, like this game just breaks all the rules. We talked about this, I think, last episode some too, but they're just it's just like, there are no rules. They basically just told themselves, like, we can write and do whatever we want. And then I guess, full circle to your point about like how they're using the engine and where they chose to focus because it was new to them. So this is a great mail to start with, by the way. There is a lot of text, right? And they're describing people's expressions and faces, and there's
zombie,
every zombie, and there's very little VO actually. I feel like this is a game that when it came out could have actually had more VO, so there's probably a production reason behind that. But because I think around this time more games were doing it, but especially
probably not a full RPG though.
Not full, but. Well, when was... Yeah, no, I guess it's a little early, but...
I think it's a little early for an RPG. I mean, just in terms of number of lines.
Yeah, I guess KOTOR 2 was kind of the first... That's when they started fully voicing stuff.
Yeah, fully voicing stuff. Yeah, a little bit later. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, it just... You're reading some of these, and especially because we're playing with high intelligence characters, we're getting the
full experience.
Yeah, I wrote a note down. Just what did I call it? Chunky speech, where you're in this dialogue tree, and then because you have the intelligence, which I assume is the reason I'm getting these, you get this one response that's like a chunky paragraph that you're like, oh yeah. Well, let me tell you this, and you're like,
exactly. Truth, blah, 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 paragraph. Exactly.
Yeah, and then the person on the other end of the conversation just doesn't know what to do with it because you're just like over explaining,
overcompensating.
But yeah, so
what we're saying basically is Nameless has a small. No.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Overcompensating. I got it.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I think you're onto something there. Like there's one thing they could do. It was write a lot of text, and put it everywhere. But I have to say, it makes. Yes, that was maybe necessity is the mother of invention because they had time, and that's the main thing they would focus on. We definitely need to focus on talking about the art at some point. We don't have it on the docket today, but down the road we should talk about art direction. But it overwhelms the player when that's the case too. You know what I mean?
Right,
because you feel like you're not sure what's important and what isn't, and so you feel like you have to kind of look and read and talk to everybody. And I'm trying not to play that way this time, so it's really, really hard.
Well, so my experience has been a little bit different in that regard, and it's probably worth going into that a little bit now. So I've been playing off the discs, and I went and found. I went and found like some post from somebody on some wiki, whatever, which was like, well, if you're playing it, you should do these things. You should go get this patch, and you should. This other patch is just a fan patch and blah, blah. I mean, just like, three or four things you should definitely do before you try to play this game in 2010 plus, off the discs or whenever. Who knows? I mean, but So I went and I did all that stuff, and I've been playing the game, and I've been doing really well. And basically, not far past where we played to last time, or where I played to last time, I got to a game-breaking bug for me, which was I was no longer able to equip different weapons into Nameless's sort of 4 quick weapon slots, which are the things that allow you to, fight with that weapon. You can basically have a few of them, and you can switch between those pretty easily and all that stuff. But I wanted to go and take an enchanted weapon and put it in that slot because there were wererats to fight. And you can only hit a wererat with a +1 weapon or a silver weapon or whatever. So I went and I tried this several times. I tried it in different levels and environments, and every single time the game would just hard crash the desktop. And I was like, oh no. Because at this point I've played 2 podcast episodes worth of stuff, and I can't move forward.
Oh, man.
And it was a bit rough.
So it just crashed.
It would just crash. It would crash. It would say it's crashed, and do you want to search for a problem on the internet? Blah blah blah. And I didn't at that point want to spend any time
researching.
Yeah, debugging.
Yeah.
Debugging an executable that was built for Windows 98. I mean, I don't even know, 95, 98, etc. Because who knows? I mean, who even knows what that? It could be a rendering bug. It could be an input bug. I mean, it's just we are so far 20 years removed from this game, or 18 years removed, that it's tough to know what to do. So what I did was bought the enhanced edition.
Oh man, and started over.
Well,
I got to hand it to you. You got pretty far.
I did. I got very far. I spent a lot of time this morning when I get up. I had to get up early. My son had stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I just dove in and just was trying to get through stuff. But I ended up finding myself getting really caught up in Hive quests that I didn't find the first time.
Yeah.
And...
Yeah, I missed a bunch.
Yeah, I know you did, and I know I did, because I found things like, oh my god, I didn't even find this person.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know to talk to this person, and I think that's part of the sort of lingua franca that you build up playing this game, is like determining what's important and what's not.
Yeah, I think that, one of our topics we want to talk about is a needle in the haystack thing.
Yeah, we should probably kind of go into that, but it's like there are a lot of sort of haystacks. There's a lot. You'll go into an area, and a perfect example is when you first go into the Dead Nation, which is this area which is these zombies and skeletons who are reanimated.
And ghouls.
And ghouls, that's right, who have been subservient to the Silent King, and you kind of get captured and blah, blah, blah. In the initial scene, you go into this room, and there's like 30 or 40 individuals, that are, and they basically say, well, you can either, submit, or, hey, guess what? You've got all us to fight. And I imagine that would go badly. So I submit, because I don't know what that means. But it's like that in the Hive, where all of those 40 individuals have things for you to do. Yeah. But you have to figure out, like, what is the game logic telling you that this is not a person of interest? That because there are markings on the map to say this is a point of interest, like this, there's a... you pop over the map. It's like, oh, if you go here, there's an entry to an inn or a bar or whatever, But there's nothing like that in the game for people.
Well, and that's even
there is in something like World of Warcraft, right? I mean, people have exclamation points over their heads.
Well, yes,
hey, go talk to this person.
Right. Well, and that's my the topic of needle in the haystack, which relates to both items and people. I guess I'll say, because there's two points to be made there. They occasionally try to make it work with people via some visual language and the models that they choose to kind of put on screen, but it's not consistent enough to really be that useful. And I think the kind of the main, it's interesting you bring up WoW, because it is the opposite of this in so many ways. And in fact, even from vanilla WoW to today, they've gone even more hand-holdy and usable in the way that they guide you around, because the map actually tells you where you need to go next, and they didn't used to do that.
That's hard to imagine.
Having been somebody who played from beta, and so quest, the quest destination for where you needed to achieve your goals was only in the text in WoW. But my point about the needle in the haystack for people and quests that you're bringing up, I wanted to at least discuss a little bit this interesting usability challenge that RPGs have gone through, in that there is some gratification and sense of accomplishment when you do put two and two together in a game like this, where it is pretty opaque and you're not sure if you're doing the right thing or talking to the right person. And then when you do, the reward, intrinsic reward, you could say is more valuable and more interesting and better than if they were to just say, oh, that's, put a symbol on that person because that's the person you need to go talk to and you don't need to go figure it out. But
give an example.
Well, WoW. I mean, WoW's an example, right? Like there is no. Oh.
Give a Planescape example.
Well,
of an intrinsic reward.
Well, no, I just meant an intrinsic reward of figuring it out as a player, where they give you a written description of the quest.
I get it, Tim.
Oh.
Give me an implicit reward that you, Tim Longo, of the Hedgerow, specifically found out.
So there's one I want to talk about, but we talked about it in pre-show, and I can't spoil it for you, so...
Go ahead. It's fine. I'm a big boy. I've even played this game before. So you'll probably say it, and I'll go, oh yeah, duh.
Let me see if I can think of another one. I can't think of another one, and we're on air, so I don't want to pause too long. So an example, this is actually more of an item example than a person example, so maybe it doesn't work exactly, but I think it still answers your...
Well, I had a counter example that we talked about pre-show, which was like systemic versus specific items, which was there's a ghoul. So we've gone into the Undercity, and we found Farad, and there's a guy kind of near Farad who wants to get his knife back. He had this special knife that, I don't know, his grandfather gave to him or whatever. And he wants you to go find it, and he stabbed a ghoul who, bit him a whole bunch of times, but he got away, and he wants the knife back. The ghoul had the knife in his face when he left. So you can go down and you get into this dead city ruled by the zombies and the Silent King and all this stuff, and you can find this ghoul, and it says knifed ghoul. This is the guy you want, and you talk to him, and he's like, "Well, I'll give it to you if you give me some meat." And at this point in my inventory, I already had from, what was her name, Mebeth or Marbeth or something like that, my own intestines, which were pretty recently living, so I count them as meat. And then I also, this time playing through, I had taken an arm off of a zombie in the mortuary, starting off this morning. So I so I had this bit of meat that I thought was fair game. And then furthermore, I then after that, and he didn't, I couldn't find any way to give him that stuff. I went through a whole bunch of different areas of the dungeon and found another severed arm that I was like, oh, okay, maybe he'll take this one. And I went all the way back to this guy, and he wouldn't take that arm either. And I'm just like, what the hell do you want? You don't want meat. You want specific meat. You want a specific thing.
Yeah.
That I have not been able to figure out how to find and give you.
No, agreed. Yeah, I mean, so I think that... I mean,
it's a counterexample to your specific needle example.
No, it is. It's a counterexample to the negative side of it, and that's kind of right. That's
the frustrating part.
That's my debate. Is that I there's I have a couple ongoing quests right now that I'm in that same situation you were in, where I really maybe I have some idea, but I kind of have no idea what to do, and where I'm at in the game is big enough to where the solution could be so many places, and it's completely frustrating, right? Because there's just no, it goes back to some of our conversations we've had in multiple episodes of is this a strategy guide game at this point? Because the internet wasn't really a thing, and these days with the internet around, I feel like that's become a crutch. for a lot of games that I think is a bit unfair. But to your point, like that's the negative side, and to you know, I mean, if you do ever figure out that thing with the knife, then that would be, you know, you'd feel like you've solved and figured something out, right? We probably should look. We probably should look at the
tension we've talked about like adventure game stuff versus role-playing game
It
stuff.
comes up a lot, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's that fine line.
So dialogue heavy is very... But it's like you don't know...
Everything is equally weighted, though, right?
Yeah,
That's the problem. It's dialogue heavy.
As a quest object.
Yeah. Well, okay, so yeah. And that's
sometimes you do. Like, you know this bronze sphere, which is kind of where I ended for listeners. That's kind of where I ended, trying to catch up. But you know that's a quest item.
Sure.
If you were to find the journal, you know that's a quest item. You know Farid is a quest character.
Yeah.
And those are pretty much like there's not a lot of other things where you're like those are quest things, you know, or whatever, you know.
So, yeah. I mean, and there's some systems in place and some debugging in place that seems to prevent you from losing some of that stuff, but you could technically go put that sphere in a crate if you wanted to, I think, and you could forget that it's there.
Yes.
And
oh man,
good luck to you. And so this kind of happened to me in a roundabout way.
Okay, so when that reminds me, you talked about Fallout and Fallout 2 and how that ties in, and that's also going to tie in on this aspect. So go ahead. Yeah.
So I forgot to tell you this story off air, but so when you bring, actually, this is a good pro tip for you because you're about to do it, and I don't mind spoiling this to you because I don't want this to happen to you. When you go to Farid and you give him the sphere, make sure you have, you know, at least like 6-8 slots open in your inventory, because when you give it to him, he's going to give you stuff. And what it seems to do in times like that, if your inventory is full, which mine was, is it will give you the stuff and fill up your inventory with the stuff that he's given you, because that's what that's scripted to do. And anything critical in your inventory that it doesn't want you to lose because it's a critical path item, it will put on the ground. Mm-hmm. But only if it's critical path. So what ended up happening to me is a couple things that were not critical path, but I actually was intentionally holding on to. One of them was a book that I found in the mortuary that I think was a key to a portal. And another one was an enormous gem that I worked hard to get and now is gone. And I didn't realize this until I was multiple saves past it and had no good way other than replaying a big chunk of stuff.
Yeah.
I had no way to go back and get this stuff. So basically I lost it. The only thing that they put on the ground to make sure that I was able to pick up were my intestine.
Oh yeah, I mean you don't want to be without. I mean, ask a person with Crohn's disease; it's no fun.
But then I was wondering, then I couldn't remember if the intestine was actually something critical that I need later. But I guess it is. But did you do the box thing? Speaking of gems,
the box thing. Yes.
Did somebody give you a box that you're supposed to?
Yes, someone gave me a box in the Hive.
And what have you done with the box?
I have solved the box puzzle.
Did you open it?
No.
See, I opened it.
I have dealt with the box.
You've dealt with it. And so I think I dealt with the box in my first playthrough so long ago. But this time I was like, you know what? I'm going to open this thing. And so I did. Yeah. And
so a fiend comes after you or something?
Enormous fiend, yeah. Really powerful.
Kicks your butt, I see.
Yeah. I did end up killing it, but then I got that big gem out of it. But I didn't get to sell the gem.
Oh, interesting.
Because
so that's an interesting difference between you and I. I get a huge amount of because you lost it, so you really got screwed.
I totally got it.
Yeah, so I went. So basically, there's a lot of different places to go. I mean, it's like a 5-step, 6-step quest. You get the box from a guy. You bring it to this guy. You bring it to that guy, and he says, "Go to see this person." And she says, "Oh, well, maybe this person will help." I did all of those things, and finally got it to a person who was like, "Oh, I know what to do with this." And takes the box and does something with it and spreads the fiend across multiple planes of existence or something like that. So I got rid of the box and I got a ton of experience points because I dealt with it without what you did, which was to fight the fiend. So,
Yeah.
so basically, you played the It Follows version, and I don't know what the equivalent is for me, but I don't know. I gave it to somebody else, and they dealt with it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I would usually have done as a player, but this time, like I said before, I'm trying to play, against type right now, and it was a fun, interesting little fight for sure. I opened it for some reason when I was in the underworld there, and so it wasn't the best location to do it. But yeah, I got this big old gem, and then that bug happened, and it's like I don't have the gem anymore, and it's gone.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the floor, nothing. Again, because it's not critical path. I assume that's how I'm reading it. But so I forget my point. But
it might be for a side quest.
Yeah,
where it's like it could come up later if you had this thing. You could do. And
it could have been
worse.
Yeah, it could have been.
And,
but just
it's worse for me too. I don't have it, but yeah.
There's just this concept. It's tricky, and I guess I'm just we have talked about this in various maybe some other adventure game or Soul Reaver or something, examples. But I'm always really conflicted over this whole topic because there's a side of me, and I think especially with Zelda Breath of the Wild these days, there's a lot of this kind of conversation, and I think amongst developers about how far do you go with usability and how far do you let the gamer explore and discover, and I think that Zelda's been really successful in the discovery side of things because it's created this dialogue and this this sort of like just this collective subconscious about like all the different things, and people are really watching, and there's just a great little stories come out of the game that were unintended, and I think the fact that we can have these conversations about this game, and there's so many different variations of things that can happen, is really cool. But the usability side of it can be so punishing that people may not see this stuff because they get stuck or they get frustrated or whatever. And the thing about WoW, having, as everyone really, knows very well by now, I'm a big WoW fan. I don't have these conversations with people when I play WoW, right? Because everyone's done the same quests.
Exactly.
Everyone knows where everything is. There's no mystery to anything. All you're really doing, the most you can get from it is just reading the text and getting some nuance from that, but you don't even have to do that because the map and the UI tells you what to do.
No, I get you. I mean, one of the things that for me, not playing WoW for quite a few years now, but one of the things it brings to mind for me is we talked about off air. We've talked about I've been playing the Darksiders games recently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's some differences between the first and second when it comes to those meta goals, which are the achievements or the trophies or what have you. And in the first game, actually, in both games, but one of the things that happens, we've talked about before, how I'm a guy who's like, I'm fine with, checking off a checklist, and that makes me happy. And I've noticed that some games will have trophies that are missable, that you might just naturally miss, and you have no way to go back.
No way to go back, yeah.
To fix them, the only way to do it is to go back and replay the whole game, up to that point or whatever. And Darksiders to Darksiders 2 is a switch in that regard. There are things that you could decide you don't want to go find. But that's your own decision. It's always possible in Darksiders 2 versus the first to go back and, even after you've completed the game, apparently, from guides I've looked at, because I've played both of these games before, I'm an insane person, but you can actually go back and just I finished the game, I can go back and go to all the environments, find any collectibles I've missed or whatever, all that stuff. And that was not entirely true in the first one. I think there were a couple things that were missable, that were trophies, and you'd have to start a new game. And that's a similar kind of difference of you missed that needle in the haystack. And literally one of them in the first one is there are two things near the very beginning of the game when you're just learning how the whole game works that you could miss.
Yeah.
And you could just miss them, and that's a trophy. And if you want to get them, sorry, start over. Yeah, and that feels very similar to what we're kind of encountering here in a game that's predates both of these by at least a decade.
Yeah, and like I'm trying to think of a good example of a game that's actually found a good compromise, because I think to your point with the achievement example, I'm trying to also kind of I'm being reflective about how to apply this to my daily work too. But to your achievement example, like I think the worst for me as a player, and I think for a lot of players, one of the worst feelings, to your point, is this sense that it's not safe to progress. That I might miss something, or that I'm not being thorough enough, or that by just playing the game I'm going to close things off. Like the other trope is collectibles or secrets or something, right? Where there's points when sometimes you go past a certain point and you can't go back and get a collectible that you wanted, and so you have to replay that level to get it or something.
Sure. Fallout 3.
And I really appreciate games where I know inherently, and maybe this is sort of Darksiders 2 as an example, I know inherently that I can just play and have no anxiety or tension.
Well, you don't know with Darksiders 2.
You had to do research in that case, you're saying?
I had to do research. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that's not the perfect example. But
Darksiders 1, there's no way for me to know that was not the case. Like, so it was like...
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, maybe not the perfect examples, but you know what I mean, right? Where there's this sense of... I think Zelda comes up because of... I think good open world games allow you to do that. But I think as a game designer, it's good to think about that psychology. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
So you try to...
What we're saying to designers is don't do this. Don't put things in where the player doesn't know that they've missed out.
Yeah, I say this. You may remember me saying this from the old days too. But I feel like I say this a lot to the team, maybe more than I should. And it's kind of it's a silly thing for me to say because it's hard for me too. Like it's not like I've gotten it right, so it's kind of almost unfair for me to hold them at this high regard as well. But a lot of times developers will make choices that will make their lives easier.
Right.
But make the players harder, their lives harder.
Yeah.
And it should always be the opposite. Because it is our work, right? And you go to work and you don't always want your workday to be hellish or hard. So you try to make things more efficient. You try to make things better for yourself as a developer. And you should still do that too. But if the decision you're making is going to actually make it harder for the player or more anxiety-ridden for the player, then you have to really think about whether that's a good decision or not, even though it might make your life easier. And what I mean by that is it's easier to just close that collectible off, right? And to design a game where you progress forward and you don't have to worry about that stuff. You're just like, well, this is just the game. This is how we did it. You just deal with it. But the player doesn't like that. So I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I think this game actually does a pretty good job of that. I feel like a lot of times, and dialogue is probably the primary example, where it's like I can go, for example, Anna, I think is her name, in Hive, the person we talked about last time or the time before, who
the tiefling,
the tiefling who I think is going to be in our party.
Yeah,
where it's like you said, like I don't want to piss her off, and I'm like, you can actually talk to her multiple times. It had an adventure game feel of like I can talk to this person, and this happens again and again and again, where it's like, oh, I can talk to this person again, and if I kind of feel like I screwed up, it's okay. I can just talk to them again and get the same options and have the opportunity. It's very rare.
Maybe. I have a counterexample, but yeah, maybe.
No, go. I mean,
well, so, last time we were talking about that dust man that was posing as a dustman but was actually a thief.
Oh, right, yeah, sure, in the Hive, yep.
Yeah, and I think I found him. I think his name was Yellowfingers. Is that the guy? Do you remember?
I don't remember a name, and it may not have come up, but sure, go ahead.
So I think because you found him, right? And
I
you
did,
turned him in, yeah. So I think
I didn't turn him in.
Oh, okay.
So what I did was I noticed that he was not a dustman, and I caught him trying to pick my pockets.
Okay, so I did the same thing, but I failed at catching him. So
really,
yeah. So I forget what option I chose, but it was very vague on what
This is a case where my dexterity works and your wisdom does not.
Oh, you think so? Oh, shoot. Yeah, you might be right. Because I chose to...
I mean, basically, my description is you catch his hand and grab it, as he's trying to pick your pockets.
Well, so my selection was something like grab his hand or, or call him out or something, right? And I chose to grab his hand. But when I did, I missed, and he just walked away and disappeared.
And took your money.
And took my money, which was only like, I don't know, it wasn't that much, but the point is he disappeared. So man, I can't actually... I don't think I can solve that quest now.
No, it's probably done.
But it's not, but it's still in my freaking journal. So literally it will always be there.
Right, yeah. And that is a thing that happened a lot in these sort of late 90s, or even earlier than this, but especially
dangling quests.
Late 90s games. Yeah, dangling quests where you're like, you get to the end of the game, you're like, I have these 6 things I want to resolve, and you can't.
Yeah.
It's impossible to resolve them, and that, I agree with you, that is the most frustrating thing. I mean, this is like pre-achievements and trophies and all this stuff. This was like the things that annoyed us as OCD people in the late 90s. Is like, oh my God, you gave me this list of crap to do, and then I couldn't actually do the thing, and I can never do the thing.
Yeah, there's nothing. You're just, that is going to be in your quest log for the rest of the game, and you're going to remember.
For the rest of my life, Tim.
Moment.
For the rest of my life.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they were assuming you'd save scum or something like that at the time, but it's also not a good solution.
No, it's not.
But yeah, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, who would? I mean, I'm the sort of back then. I mean, it's like we have these 120 megabyte hard drives, and you're like, I'm gonna just leave like 2 or 3 save files.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that has an impact.
Rotate between those 2 or 3. I can't go back. I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's the worst.
Well, the point the additional point I wanted to make in that example is in the dialogue descriptions or the action descriptions, to your point about like how good is the game at telegraphing your options and what the repercussions would be, something that I think BioWare both went too far in over the years with the Paragon and Renegade stuff, and maybe Dragon Age has found a nice happy medium, but I want to talk about Witcher in a second too. That, it's like they weren't explicit about what the repercussions of your choices were going to be. So it was nice in that it was gray and you were really exploring and discovering the options, and maybe you were saving and loading to do that or something, but I had no idea that was going to happen. I wouldn't, obviously if it was clear enough, I wouldn't have chosen that one. I would have tried something else. But then there's that sort of concept of living with your repercussions, and what we wouldn't have these conversations or tell these stories to each other if we had played the perfect game, you know what I mean, and played the perfect 100% run through, because then we would both have seen everything in the same way. Right. So it's just weird. We need to strive to find that balance of like where there's this gray.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's...
But there's still, but it's not closing doors for you. And I feel like The Witcher maybe is in the ballpark.
Okay, we'll get to The Witcher in a second. But you point out, like, the sort of the internet version of this, like, post-internet being a thing versus not. And I feel like you and I are in a weird case, because in 1999, when this game came out, we're both working at a game developer, for crying out loud. You are a designer, Reed Knight, who we talk about frequently and had as an interview on the show, is designer, and me. We all love RPGs. We played Baldur's Gate to abstraction. We're into this stuff. I would say an ordinary person in the middle of nowhere who likes D&D games doesn't have the opportunity to have these conversations, and so it's like... My point is, I feel like this game is meant to provoke watercooler talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the model isn't there yet.
But 90% of the people are not at the watercooler.
Anyone who might buy it is not going to necessarily have a conversation with other people who are playing this weird game.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear if there's any listeners who played the game back then. If they have any stories that, if they were not game developers.
I talked to my buddy, or how you made your way through this if you didn't have the internet. Mm-hmm. I mean, because the internet muddies everything. You can go and make decisions based on crap you read on the internet. That's fine. You know, and at this time it was kind of the switch was happening. But I can imagine, you know, a large portion, I mean, I bet no more than 10% of America was on a real decent connection to the internet.
Yeah, I mean, there were some forums.
Or whatever.
Right, I mean, you know, I guess in this era. Sure. And Baldur's Gate was a big hit,
maybe
right?
20%.
So.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean,
and it was multiplayer.
This is the thing that you're like, the decision branching tree on any number of quests is just huge. And you're just like, you know, and you don't know where things are going to get closed off and how you're going to feel about that. I mean, there is kind of a meta commentary about the whole experience of the Nameless one and how he lives a million lives about video games themselves.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you can play this game, and we're playing it our second time through, and, of course, you could play this game as many times through as you want. And that's kind of the point of the meta-narrative in some ways, is that he's done everything you can do. You know, he's kind of like the member of the Q continuum he's been a plant. Everybody's been the tree. You know, I don't know. I'm probably a little bit too obscure at this point for some listeners, but you know, if you're immortal, at a certain point, you've done everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. You know, and that's kind of a commentary on being a player.
Yeah.
Of any individual game, certainly RPGs.
And we've gotten a few hits on people really saying that this was one of their favorite RPGs, writing letters and stuff. And if I think about your point about the solo player, as I will call them, the one who isn't doing the water cooler talk and having the discussions that you would
the Lone Ranger.
The loner. Well, yeah, the solo. I like solo better than loner, but solo player. You know, when it comes to like being a memorable RPG or a memorable game, you may not be sharing what happened to you with a friend, but I think one thing that I am impressed with this game, continue to be impressed with, even compared to say Fallout or my memories of the others, is you still like you're still surprised and delighted by what does occur. You know what I mean? Even though you're not maybe looking at all the different variations and you're not talking to your friend about what did they do, like with our box story, right? Like what happened to you when you opened the box?
Right.
It was like, sure. But still, I'm still constantly surprised that they're letting me do this, or that they did this instead of this, or am I gonna be able to do this or resolve things in this way? I think it's definitely helpful to play a high intelligent character in that way, but. Yeah, there's a lot of twists and turns and interesting things happening that you know, still fulfilling as a solo player, I think.
Well, that ties into a topic that you had mentioned pre-show, which was like the sort of Fallout 2 narrative design, where you have lots of little moments, that are normally that sort of water cooler talk, but that you might experience differently as you know, in different playthroughs. You want to kind of expand on that? Yeah,
I just wanted to make I think kind of coming full circle a little bit with the volume of writing and quests and dialogue in this game. For whatever the reason is that it became so dense compared to some of the other games and such an adventure game versus an RPG, it does mean that there's a lot of people, as we talked about, a lot of people to talk to and a lot of different sort of touch points and interaction points between all of those people. And especially because the party members that you get are so interesting and also have their own dynamic, and you can pick some of them up and not others, etc., that when you go through this game, little conversations that are going to be occurring or decisions you made have these interesting little effects on things and cascading effects. Like we always talk about like the matrix and flow chart of an RPG. Not having worked on a traditional RPG myself, just that, looking at that flow chart boggles my mind. And I know Bethesda, famously talks about theirs, as well, and just kind of like the crazy interactions. I was thinking about
Fallout 4 because, the end game of Fallout 4 is meant to sort of push the player into a choice between one of 4 factions and I'm not going to remember them all because I haven't played it post-launch, because once I've been working on a game, I can't play it. So I don't really know how this turned out. But, I mean, there's the Minutemen, and there's the Underground Railroad, and there's the Institute, and maybe one other faction. And there's all these interactions between... Oh, the Brotherhood of Steel, of course. So there's like these 4 main factions, and you come to points in the game where you can kind of choose to go with one or the other. And it's meant to sort of empower player choice. I don't know how that turns out, as a player. It's a thing I always worry about. Like, so with RPGs, if you're playing a pen and paper RPG, the DM can the DM knows the people he's playing with, and can kind of massage and make people feel whatever he wants them to feel.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it could be, I want you to feel kind of terrible about your decision, sure. It could also be, I want you to feel great about it, or ambivalent, or, curious. Or, I mean, there's a million things that a good storyteller could make you want to feel. But once you actually put it into cold hard code and the limited experience of an actual shippable thing, you have to make a bunch of decisions about, well, what are the likely areas people are going to be interested in?
Yeah.
What are the likely outcomes people are going to choose? I was on a podcast, and we'll talk about this in the feedback more, but I was on a podcast this week, and I was like, well, we fixed, working on a Bethesda game, we fixed the big bugs, the ones that felt really egregious to us, and it was like, it's a huge game with a billion, branching paths. We fixed basically the trunks. I mean, the big ones that we thought most people would go down, and you get, I mean, I think that to a certain degree that's happening here.
Yeah, well, and
I think it always is, right? It has to. Like, you have to make it as satisfying as you can, for the person who's really like the paladin, type.
Yeah.
The BioWare sort of renegade, what's the other one? Renegade? Paragon, sort of. Those are that's why you go naturally to these binaries. Is like, people mostly want to be really the evil, horrible human being, or in their games, other than in life, except for Tim, or they want to be like the best possible versions of themselves. Not like Tim, but like me. And those are basically your extremes that you mostly get, and you don't necessarily worry about a lot of sort of the intermediary places that you could be.
Yeah, but I mean, also, though, to that point, going, again, full circle to your original question, or the mail that we started the episode with, because writing and dialogue scripting was something they could do a lot of, I feel like part of my point with the little moments that are all over this game is, it feels like because they had the ability to write descriptive, great, well-written descriptive text about and have dialogue about pretty much anybody, they saw kind of almost every character as an opportunity for some interesting, weird thing. And so, example that you haven't gotten to yet, but when Anna becomes a part of your party member, part of your party, and you start going through places you've been before, people will treat you differently because she's with you. And she will treat people differently.
Because
and so
she's a tiefling and she's a fiend. I remember some of this from
and she's
18 years ago or whatever. Yeah,
she's also a local, right? So she's from the Hive, and I don't want to spoil too much.
And she has a sharp tongue.
She's also an important person. She's related to an important person, and I had this interaction with her and this other woman that was just this interesting little interaction between them, and it was very subtle and very interesting that it was written, the exchange I was having with this woman, because Anna was in my party, that wouldn't have been there if Anna hadn't been. And it just boggles my mind. And of course, the thing is it's cheap, right? It's just text. Right. But these
at
games,
that point, you're so invested.
Yeah, I mean, there's just somebody.
And at that point, it's not just text.
No, exactly.
As
no,
an implementer, it's not. It's just text. But as a person playing the game, it is infused with so much more at that point. It is no longer just text.
No, it is. It's not. It's just text in the mechanical way, but for the designer too, or for the writer, right? It was like this was a little mini story they wanted to tell about these two characters that added this little intrigue that I didn't even. I don't remember this from the first time I played. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, I can tell you who it was I was talking to if you want, but it'd be interesting to see if you
was it the sinning the prostitute. She's an ideological prostitute, and she has a hyphenated name. I can't remember her name. She becomes.
Oh no! This
not her. Okay.
This lady's called. Her name is Iron Knowles.
Oh, Iron Knowles. I found her. Yeah.
So go back and talk to Iron.
I will when I get Anna. Yeah.
When you get Anna, go back and talk to Iron Knowles, which I assume is
nails
because she collects nails for the coffin maker.
Nails, yeah.
Which is like. Yeah, we're not going to get time this time, but next time we have to make sure we talk about the theme, the thematic death stuff throughout the whole game. But very intriguing. But anyway, that's just a really small moment of just like we don't to your previous point, the trunks, like we don't have the budget and the time to put those sorts of little moments in very often anymore, right? Because we're so focused on the macro, and it bums me out because I see this stuff, and it really, and maybe, again, the new Zelda seems so systemic driven that's the perfect way to achieve some of that stuff because the systems actually create those moments for you, and you're not actually handcrafting each one as much. But I think about.
I feel like we should play Far Cry 2 for the cast because I think that's a. My worry, oh my God, this is such a huge issue when we're an hour in. So we're going to come back to it. My feeling and my fear with systemic stuff and these little moments that come out of that is that because it's systemic, it becomes forgettable.
Yeah, I get you. No, it is different. I'm not saying it's the same kind of little moments for sure.
Sure, yeah.
I'm just saying from a development standpoint, I'm wondering if we are going into a systemic direction because it's the only thing we can wrap our heads around because it's so freaking difficult
it's cheaper.
It's cheaper.
And that wraps right around back to your beginning conversation about choosing the easy path.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, so the reason I wanted to bring up The Witcher specifically...
I've been waiting.
In this regard is I feel like that I'm sure I can think of a better example, but it's the only one it's the one I get closest to. I feel like in Witcher 3 they may have found some of the best balance of this thing we're talking about, where they give you enough direction and hand holding, but not too much. There's a lot of gray in that game. You don't always completely know what outcome is going to happen based on the dialogue choice or whatever, and they don't tell you exactly where everything is all the time. And so it's kind of like this interesting merger, and there is a crap load of content, right? Where there is a lot of handcrafted stuff as well. And Bethesda does this as well, right? I know that it's not like there's procedural dungeons or anything.
No,
so
not anymore.
That mixture of handcrafted and gray, I guess I'll just summarize as sort of like that gray space where it isn't Paragon or Renegade. Mm-hmm. I feel that in Witcher as a modern example, and not, it's an RPG hybrid, but that I think is what we need to strive for. You want some of this Planescape Torment in your game. You just don't want it to make it. You just don't want to make it so to have such a big usability problem to where you alienate people. But I don't know. It's flabbergasting.
I mean, I think you're onto something. I mean, one of the things that. Here's another hour-long conversation. But one of the things that happens with a Witcher game versus a Bethesda game, for example, is in The Witcher you're playing Geralt or whatever
Geralt, yes. Yeah. Don't even say.
Okay, I'm not a GIF person. I don't freaking care. It's an animated image. Go nuts. Anyway, so if you play Geralt, you're playing Geralt. It's a guy.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
With white hair and white beard. You're playing a Bethesda game, you're playing one of, 9 races, I forget what it is, but it's like, a cat person, a lizard person, and then 3 or 4 different types of human person, and then different elves, and blah, 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 etc. So you've got all those different people you could play, and there are interactions for those people in the world that are different, and then you're just like, you're also possibly a mage, a thief, or one of the other 20 through 25 skill trees that they have, and any 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever combinations you want. I mean, it's just like, it's overwhelming.
I know,
the amount of choice starts at the beginning.
But to your point, like, well, I guess I don't know. We're gonna. This is crazy. We're gonna go.
It's too big. We gotta stop here.
Just my closing thought on that is the trick, and I don't know if this is the case, and I'm probably going to get a lot of. We'll get responses on this one because I think there is a reason. I've dissected this a lot for myself as an RPG player because I love RPGs, and I do play a lot where you are playing the character that you've created. Mm-hmm. You know, WoW is a good example, right? But also, I find myself often more driven to the games that are based on a character, and that's why I call Witcher a hybrid, because I feel like it changes.
Final Fantasy games, my friend.
What's that?
You got to play more Final Fantasy games, my friend.
Yeah, it sounds like I do. That I like that the problem space has changed once you choose a character, right? And there's still wiggle room into how you play that character, but the stories and how people react to you can be more interesting, I think, because they can go deeper. And I don't know if this is the case, but one of my suspicions about why I typically bounce off of pretty much every Bethesda game, even though I love RPGs and I love open world games, is because of the sort of like peanut butter spreading of the what's at stake, because of your point that that you can't make anything truly important, right? Because everything has to be possible. Because you don't know who your main character is. Mm-hmm. And I have the same problem often with BioWare games pre-say Mass Effect, maybe, right? Because I feel like Shepard had more of an identity.
Shepard's more specific, but Jade Empire is less.
Yeah, and the Baldur's Gate games are a great example of kind of like pretty much just, you know, you're pretty much your most vanilla story. So, I don't know. It's something I think about a lot about, and we can close this conversation down. I'm sure it'll come back up. And then the whole systemic thing you just mentioned with Far Cry, like, that's a whole nother thing.
Exactly. Well, and I think we need to probably at some point visit that.
We'll probably play that, yeah.
Anyway, so let's take a quick break, because not only did we only touch like 2 of the things we were going to talk about, we also opened a huge can of worms with like 3 or 4 other things we hadn't planned to talk about. So we'll think about that, and we'll come back, do some feedback, and plan our next time. Welcome back from the break. Normally at this part of the podcast we do some feedback and some email. We're going to try to get through that kind of quickly this time, just because we went a full hour just on topics mostly that we hadn't planned in advance. So we have a ton of things to talk about next time, and that will tie into what we play next time and all that stuff.
I hope they were interesting for people, because we're kind of like we're going so slowly through this game now, and we'll just have to see how our progress goes. But the topics that are coming up, I think, are interesting. I mean, they're fun to talk about.
They are.
They're just unexpected.
There's a lot there. I was, and I'll talk about this again towards the end of the episode. But I was on a podcast for Kotaku this past week, and any number of the questions they asked me as part of the interview, I could have gone on for an hour, 2 hours. In some cases, 3 or 4 hours, just like the nuances discussing one question about game development. And part of the whole process of this podcast is like, digging out those kind of bigger issues as we play through these older games that were really kind of central to us. Yeah, the games are almost a catalyst for that stuff more than even sometimes talking about the game itself, I'm finding, right? Yeah, they are. They're like a bone charm. Jeez. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I know. There you go. Another OGs for the crowd. Okay, well, let's go to the feedback. And, you have the first. Marcus, I believe, Yeah. The Wonders of Gaming by Marcus. Do you have a love of video games? Do you want to know about the many aspects that go into game development?
Do you want, I assume this may be a typo, a nostalgic trip to the great games of the past? Well, look no further. This podcast is for you, two veteran game developers who love games as much as you do, discuss the ins and outs of the landmark games of the past. Their thoughtful and insightful discussions on classic games really open you up to the many nuances of the game that you may have overlooked as a player. Definitely worth your time. Thank you, Marcus.
Yes.
Very nice.
We are people who love our video games, despite the brutality that they have inflicted upon us through the years.
Oh, yeah.
And I really mean as making them more than anything else. Playing them, whatever. You play them at your own rate, and et cetera, and sometimes we play at a punishing rate on this podcast.
Yeah, this is creating some punishment, though first world problems, of course. But
no, this particular game, and my, of course, issues with the original versus playing. You're going to the mill on this one. Blah, blah, yeah, I'm having the time of my life trying to get through this thing a second time, but in ways that it didn't happen the first time. But this is what we're about, trying not just to convey what we love about the medium, but also to really kind of dig in to the questions that we ask when we play them and when we make them. So thank you, Marcus. That's the whole thing. So mine is kind of short in, kind of in response or kind of relation to that. It says, "Ah, geez, another 5-star by Jesse, if that is my real name." That's his whole.
Seriously,
that's his whole thing. By Jesse, if that is my real name.
That is brilliant, Jesse.
Yeah, good stuff, Jesse. Jesse's not the only one. We've had one from Andrew, which we won't read this time, who says, by Andrew hyphen, if that is their real name. Anyway, by Jesse, if that is my real name, he says, two devs of games you've most definitely played pick apart games of yesteryear with the eyes and minds of a dev. Two have fantastic back and forth, insightful revelations, and quirky, fun senses of humor. Without a doubt, worth your time every week. Which is remarkable. I hope to be good like once a month, but once a week, I'll take it.
So, should I do my second one?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead with Rory.
Insightful even for non-devs by Rory the Person, if that is your real name, as Brett would say. I am a lifelong gamer that has lately been interested in the nuts and bolts that make my favorite games work. While occasionally the production can seem charmingly amateur.
Thank you. I take full credit.
Appreciate that. We definitely are doing this in our basement.
I want to thank my associate producers, James Taylor,
Henry and June,
Longo, Henry and June, a number of sort of side characters of the cast.
Yeah, I really have to work on my sound quality too. I need to figure that out. Anyway, continuing, Rory, the podcast feels like I get to sit down over a beer with the people who really know what goes into making the games I love to play. Not to mention the selection of games they chose to cover has been right up my alley. Would recommend for anyone wishing that their games, podcast, and media went a little deeper into the substance of games. Well, thank you. We try. We're definitely not experts in everything, but we are charmingly amateur, which I appreciate. And
actually, one of the things we rarely talk. There are a couple areas that I feel we don't talk about enough, and we're going to talk about in connection with this game a little bit, and I think we'll talk about a little bit more in the future. But art direction is something that we're not particularly strong on. Music is something that we've kind of come up as appreciators. For Eco and Shadow in particular, of just like, oh my god, these soundtracks just slay us. Yeah,
but not able to really speak intelligently about it. But
I feel like we should have David Collins on or Jesse Harlan and just like pick their brains of like, how do you do this? Like, how do you? God, I mean, at some point we're gonna have to play a game where we can get the composer.
Yeah. Oh, we can totally orchestrate that.
Or an art director. Oh, nice. Well done.
That was unintended.
Oh, sure it was.
I swear, I'm not that smart.
Welcome to our unscripted podcast about video games. Oh, that's a good one, right? I appreciate that. You're getting better in your old age.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'm going to do one last one just because we went a full hour on discussion, and I do actually. One of the things I've been thinking about as I produce the show is I want to kind of not go too crazy each week on the feedback segment.
We need to be mindful.
It becomes a little bit yay us, and I don't want to be too much yay us, especially because us includes Tim. Anyway, the last one says, "Fantastic insight into classic games by RJ." I got to work on my trill.
Is that a zombie? What are you trying to do there?
I don't know. He's got like 16 R's in his name. Anyway, RJ says, nostalgia, industry insider insight, and just the right amount of goofy humor is what you get from Dev Game Club podcast. I love listening to Brett and Tim chat about classic video games, how they were made, and their lasting influence on the industry. Aw, jeez. Man, everybody loves you. Everybody loves your weird Fargo quirks. Yeah. So that's, like I said, we want to kind of not go too crazy on those sorts of things in the future because they're a little bit yay us at a certain point. But we do like to talk about it. And, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That is our goal.
Glad people are enjoying it. Try to get through stuff and talk about some interesting stuff along the way, and hopefully something sticks.
Yeah, no,
we're fairly unscripted, so obviously,
fairly well unscripted,
completely
according to Tim's puns. Oh my God, I'm gonna in the middle of the night. How do I talk?
Now I need to think of an art director one.
Oh my God.
We do have an email that we'll do next time. We have some more mail. We have some more feedback to get to next time, but we have gone really long already just on the discussion this time. One of the things we're pushing for, and we talked about in the last few episodes, we're trying to get to 75 reviews on iTunes, preferably all 5-star, and that has been true through 68 reviews. I just don't
English speaking.
Are we stacking the deck here? I don't know.
I've been thinking about getting your cats and dogs to come in and give us a 1-star because obviously they want your attention. But so far, we've been keeping that 5-star at that 100% average, which is amazing to me. When we get to 75, as I've talked about, we're going to send out some gifts. From our previous histories games. We haven't talked about what those are, but we will when we get there. And we're only 7 away. And because we only have the names of the people who've given reviews, not just ratings, I go and I rate and I don't write a review, your odds are pretty good. If you went back through the history of this podcast, you could pick out the whatever number of reviews. Odds are pretty good in your favor. Now's the time. I don't know that they'll be this good ever again in the future. So... you might get something pretty grand, from being involved at this point in feedback. We do this because, I just love people talking about how great I am and how Tim's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
I knew that was the real reason.
I knew it. Yeah, it's all about that.
Well, we're flattered that the stars have been so high. Please be honest with your reviews too.
Yes, absolutely. Give your honest reviews, give the 5-star rating, and send us email if you have concerns. Nameless, I think was his name at the beginning, the top of the cast. I'm looking back. Yeah, Nameless. He kind of said, "Hey, look, I'm not sure you're exactly right about this," and we talked about it, and that's what we're here for. So
yeah, that's good. More of that.
That's good feedback. Yeah,
I'd like to have the debates going.
Yeah, exactly. We're going back 18 years on this game, and it's oh yeah, Tim played it after he played all these other ones, and I don't remember how this fit in. And we don't do a ton of research more than just kind of where does this fit? Just what was out, what else was out. We don't do a ton of reading interviews of people who worked on it because we want to talk to those people. We want to pick their brains. And if we know we're going to get them, we'll read them then. Anyway, all of that is to say, give us your 5-star reviews, send us email, give us those ratings. We'll read them, and and hopefully in a week or two, we'll be sending out a few gifts to people who've taken the time to rate and review on iTunes. So, next time.
Yeah.
Because I got a little wound up this time due to crash issues, I don't think I actually described them specifically, but basically whenever I tried to equip a new weapon, once I got this far in the game, basically to where we were last time.
You hit it.
Okay, yeah, so basically I could no longer equip new weapons, and that meant I was doomed, because I couldn't equip an enchanted weapon, that meant I couldn't fight the wererats, etc., etc. So I didn't get much further this time. I did get through all of the Undercity stuff, and I found the Bronze Sphere, which is kind of a big MacGuffin, what Farid wants, and so the next thing I'll be doing is going to Farid. But we thought, because of that, next time we'll just go through Ravel's maze, which might mean we stretch this podcast out to 6 episodes. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'll play it by ear.
We'll play it by ear, but there have been so many topics that have come up, and so many topics that we have just been pushing aside as we discuss things in depth, that I think 6 might be enough, or not enough. We might need 7 at this rate. You know, if not, we'll push it to future series. But there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get through. Yeah, I think we'll get through. I think we should be able to. I think the game speeds up, kind of, or at least there's fewer locations, maybe past Ravel's maze around.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of my feeling about like the Hive.
Yeah, the Hive is really the chunkiest. Yeah.
So much stuff. So many individuals that have been specifically quested or specifically had dialogue or been named or whatever, etc. Yeah, I think it. I feel like as you go, it accelerates, and there are other games that do that. Anyway, and then a final plug. As part of my work as a developer, but also of doing Dev Game Club, those who've been following us since the Final Fantasy IX games or joined us since Final Fantasy IX know that they may have found us through Kotaku. Kotaku Split Screen, which is a podcast with Kirk Hamilton and Jason Schreier, had me on last week to interview just about my time both at LucasArts and Bethesda and everything in between, and just, I don't know, the million things that have come up in the last, how long have I been doing this? Like 18 years? 19 years I've been doing this. 19 and a half years. Of just development and just the things that have changed over that time. And we talk about a million things, and go out and look for that.
Cool.
It was a really fun interview to do. They've pulled out a couple things on Kotaku where they've just kind of pulled out segments and done transcripts. You remember Eric Johnston and Mark Littell, who did some work with us on Starfighter. So they came up today, and then last week we were talking about Skyrim and like what bugs you leave in and what you don't and things like that. And it's been interesting to see how people respond to that stuff. So if you're interested in those parts of my career, go give a listen. Or just, you know what, go out, find a friend who would be interested in Dev Game Club and tell them to come listen to us. That's about all I have. You can find me on Twitter at Brett_Duville and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Thank you. And at Dev Game Club is where you can find the podcast. I try to monitor that stuff daily. You can also send us mail at devgameclub@gmail.com. Both reviews and emails are things that tend to get read on the air for the podcast and sometimes discussed. So if you have a question, send it to email at devgameclub@gmail.com or throw it in your review and we'll get to it as well on iTunes. So for the nonce, I am Brett Duville and he is
Tim Longo.
And for now, I bid you good night.
Good night.
Can open, worms everywhere.